Hello, everyone. Welcome to another AIGA Atlanta Insider. I'm Courtney Maka, and I will be your host this month alongside Meg Link. Meg and I are both members of the AIGA Atlanta In-House Committee, and we are always looking forward to connecting you all with inspiring leaders in our community. I currently work in-house as a senior graphic designer at a commercial real estate company, CBRE.
And I'm a freelance designer and an illustrator. I've worked in-house for many years.
Today, we are speaking with Doug Sprinkle, who is a manager of creative services at the Home Depot. Fun fact, did you know that Home Depot is the highest ranked Fortune 500 company, both founded and headquartered in Atlanta? That's pretty cool. Doug has described himself as a problem solver with a distinct love of brand identity and an appreciator, read nerd, of many things. His work and passions continue to be focused on retail design and branding, though leadership and the relationships made along the way are the foundation of his career. Before we dive into our conversation, I'd like to introduce the rest of our in-house committee. We are a small but mighty crew of passionate designers, many of us in-house, who always are looking forward to bringing you the best in-house content that Atlanta has to offer. If you have any interest in joining our crew, feel free to reach out to our board chair, Lucas Alvarez. And now I'd like to give the floor over to Amy Mangan, our favorite partner at TCG with all the latest trends and intel about what's happening in the design world in Atlanta.
Thanks, Courtney. Hi, guys. I'm Amy with TCG, and I'm excited to share the March Market Minute with you. I can't believe it's March already. So awesome news. Airbnb has announced that they're going to be putting a tech hub here in Atlanta. Part of the reason they chose our beautiful city is because of the great technology and digital schooling that we have available here. But one of the other reasons that they selected Atlanta is because of the large companies' commitment to diversity hiring throughout Atlanta, and they wanted to be able to tap into that market as well. So they're coming here soon, and it's going to be specifically for several of their product development teams. Also, we touched on Microsoft a while back, but some things have changed in a positive note for Atlanta specifically. So we already knew they were coming here and putting an East Coast hub. Now, in most of their other locations outside of Redmond, Washington, of course, they have about 2,500 employees. They actually just purchased additional land because they hope to get the Atlanta complex here to be over 3,000, maybe even more employees. So it's going to be a huge jobs driver for Atlanta, which is fantastic. And then lastly, for Atlanta, the Reimagine ATL group is actually starting a youth apprenticeship program in order to funnel more talent into the film and creative industry locally, which is cool. On a national level, we'll skip over to the next slide. There's some cool data that I want to chat with you about. So 25% of organizations are saying that they're going to be integrating their marketing, their sales, and their customer experience functions into one single funnel by 2023, which 2023 is like a year and a half away. So keep your eyes peeled for maybe seeing some reorgs or realignments within larger organizations. And you might even start to see job postings that would fall or report to a title that you may not have previously reported to. And then on the candidate front, if you're hiring right now, this is really important. So 62% of professionals are telling us that they lose interest in a job if they don't hear back from that company within 2 weeks of the initial interview date. So if we skip over to the next slide, we can kind of dive into that a little bit more. So it's called breadcrumbing is the new term, but basically what it means is stringing people along. So if you're interviewing somebody, it's really important that you're staying in constant communication with them. And I think there's this misnomer right now because of the pandemic, and maybe there were a lot of layoffs or, things change for people's careers, that there's tons of candidates and there's immense time to hire. That's not really the case. There are very few candidates available on the market. The market's super hot right now for creative marketing and digital people. It's really extra hot in Atlanta. Our unemployment rates for these folks are around like 3.5% to 4%, depending on the position. So if you're looking to hire somebody, it's really important that if you find the right person, you're moving that process forward and you're communicating with them regularly throughout that process. So 2 weeks is kind of that key number that you want to make sure you followed up with the person or your HR department has. Or if you're working with a company like TCG, you're telling your person that you're working with so that we can communicate that to the clients or to the candidates on your behalf, and keep your company in the forefront for them. So people will often ghost the employer if they haven't heard back. They will potentially blacklist the company. They will vent on social media and or post negative comments on review sites. So you don't want that to happen. If you're a hiring manager, you want people to look at your company in a good light. So make sure you're communicating, even if somebody's a no, even if the rec was pulled, even if, X, Y, or Z, just tell people, even if it's just a little canned email that you have that you can say, hey, thanks for your interest. We actually filled the role, or let them know what's going on. So there's a lot of movement in the market right now. Things are very busy. So just make sure you're staying on top of that communication through the hiring process. And with that, I am going to hand it back over to Courtney. As always, if you have questions, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or shoot me an email.
Thanks, Amy. I love that Atlanta is thriving despite everything, and great tip about communication. So before we really jump into this, quick reminder to everyone who is listening in, you are free to add any questions in the chat or in the Q&A feature, and we will funnel them over to Doug at the end of the hour. So if there's anything you're curious about, anything you want to know more about during our conversation, pipe in. You're welcome. So hi, Doug. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this month.
Yeah, thank you. Glad to be here.
I would love if you started by just describing a bit more about what you do in your role as manager of creative services.
Yeah, of course. So there are a bunch of us as far as creative leaders within Home Depot. I'm one among many, but my team that I actually work with is a hybrid design and engineering team. We are within supply chain. We essentially serve as the internal supplier within Home Depot. So my team and our organization, our division, is kind of a strike team behind the scenes, bringing more and more in-house for Home Depot as far as different product assortments. It gives us better control, more private branding that's out there. There's about 36 private brands that Home Depot owns that you see out there in the store. And my organization, my team, I have a small team. I used to have a really big team when I was on the agency side. My team now, though, is 5 people. So I have a couple of designers who are primarily print and packaging, so doing in-store signage, some environment design, packaging design. I also have an engineer on my team she does a lot of the science behind things. And my team really does cross a lot of different verticals, if you will, because we do have to wear a lot of hats. We are within supply chain and such, but we have a photographer, we have some .com capabilities, the packaging, print, signage, environment, and the engineering side of it. We work to create efficiencies across the entire organization, whether that be on a practicality side of things with distribution and everything like that, all the way up to the shopper experience. So making it better for the shopper in store, more intuitive, easier to get from point A to point B and get out the door with what you want.
Cool. So it sounds like it's small, but very powerful, big ripple effects across the organization.
Yeah, a lot of learning.
So you've been in this role for almost 2 years, but your relationship with Home Depot goes way further back. I would love if you kind of share how you got to Home Depot and through Home Depot to be here today with us.
Yeah, before I dive into my story, I just want to give a note to anybody out there. It's important to have a story. It's important for you to have a story, especially when you are like looking for another job and you're in there interviewing and you're trying to present yourself. It's more than just what you've done, what's in your portfolio, what's on your resume. It is about like, who are you? Where did you come from? How'd you get there? I have kind of a funny story, unexpected route to being able to get to where I am now. I think most people can probably say that. It's not like you planned ahead of time and it went exactly how you thought it would go. And I'll just kind of start with where I was back in college. So I went to Florida State University, which is not known for its design. It is not big flashy school. You're not talking about SCAD or anything like that. But I accidentally got a really good education in design because when I went to FSU, and this was back in 2001, I got there, started in things, was taking the gen ed, that kind of stuff. And when I got talking in my first year, talking to my student advisor, she, who had been there for longer than I'd been alive at the time, proceeded to tell me that the organization of Florida State was trying to do away with the design program and focus on traditional fine arts. So here I am, having started in on a design degree and hearing that they may be killing the program right as I'm getting in there. What had happened, though, is by the time I'm having this conversation, it was about a year and a half into this process. And the people that were left, the professors that were left, were fighting to keep the program alive. They were very passionate. They really cared about what they're doing. And by nature of that, I ended up getting a really good education just by accident, by circumstance. I'm really happy about that. It was pure luck. But that carried me into kind of the next stage of things, which is once I got out of college, I did what a lot of people do, and I went back home. I went where friends and family were, Memphis, Tennessee, and there wasn't a really robust design community there. So the beginning of my career was actually very humble. I said it was inglorious beginnings when we talked about this before. I came back, went looking for jobs. There wasn't a lot in Memphis. I ended up getting my first job for 2 years out of college was at an industrial scale printing and packaging facility. It was in the South Industrial District of Memphis, so it was just south of downtown. Not a super safe area. The place was huge, though. It had 19 presses. They're all 30 and 40 feet apiece and that kind of thing. And we did a lot of packaging work and print. It was a very technical job, and that actually really was huge for me. So coming out of college, I didn't have a lot of the technical knowledge that I needed to be a designer. I, however, had an amazing person who I worked with who had been there for, I think, 6 years of that. And he taught me more than I learned on the technical side by a long shot in college and even self-teaching. I took that technical knowledge and it carried me through a big chunk of my career because quite frankly, it gave me the ability to create and make happen the ideas that I had in my head, which was huge. I didn't want to be doing technical work. I didn't start my career wanting to be in that. I wanted to be focusing on branding, brand identity, and strategy. That's really where I wanted to go. Well, 2 years into that, I got laid off with a third of the company, and I got another job a number of weeks later, and it was with a company that was at the time the oldest direct marketing agency in Memphis. And they're also an in-house printer. It was a family-run business, really small. There were only, I think, 32, 34 people at the time. They had never offered creative services. So when I came in thinking I was just going to have a technical role, that I was going to be like doing a production role almost. Well, the owner of the company trusted me. He believed in me. So he started throwing me into the fire, basically. I had to buy some nicer clothes at like, I think I was 24 years old or something at the time, because I was then sitting down with like C-level executives from Crown, was it? Oh, I'm blanking on the name of the hotel chain. But I had to sit down and basically present on the spot, have these ideas and really convince people. And I did not have that experience up to that point. So it was kind of trial by fire. It was really useful. And then about a year and a half later after that, in 2009, my girlfriend at the time, we had been together for a year at that point. She got into the PhD program in Emory and was like, I'm moving to Atlanta. Are you coming with me? And I was like, okay, yeah, I'm coming. So I uprooted a good job in a good situation. I left on really good terms. And I came to Atlanta cold turkey in 2009, which was, of course, shortly after the housing market crash and everything along that and the recession. Not super great timing on my part. So I got over here. Things didn't end up working out great on the personal level. It was 8 or 9 months. We went our separate ways. She had a whole life that started off with like the PhD program. It's like a family over there, that kind of thing. And I was in a whole new world and trying to figure out what I was doing with my career. So I was doing freelance at that point. I got connected with the creative group, which is kind of funny because Amy and I have been talking to each other and in the same orbit for about 11 years now, I guess. In 2010, I got a gig through the creative group doing just signage for Puerto Rico stores in Home Depot. It was this thing where they pulled in 11 freelancers and sat us down at a conference table in the office there for a company called IMS. And they were essentially kind of a print production provider for Home Depot at the time. Us 11 freelancers cranked out thousands of pieces of signage in Puerto Rican because they were opening some new stores down there. And that was my first blush of Home Depot. Well, they kept me on. Everyone else gradually kind of tapered off. They like let a few people go here and there once the project was winding down, but they wanted to keep me around for some other sidebar stuff that they had. I parlayed that into getting in the door and doing a project at Home Depot where I was inside the store support center, their headquarters. I was there for a number of months. I think it was probably 4 or 5 months when I heard that the senior director of visual merchandising at that point at the in-store environment division was going to do an overhaul of the way that they tasked their creative services outside. So who they tapped into from an agency level. They had roughly like 10 agencies at the time they were doing work, and it was a little scattered. The brand identity was not very cohesive. There wasn't a lot of consistency. So she at the time, Stephanie Carlamagno, she brought it under one umbrella. So she brought in Big Red Rooster, an agency out of Ohio, and essentially fielded a full-size agency within the headquarters of Home Depot. So this is going to be interesting too for this conversation because the series you're doing is about in-house, and I was not technically in-house, but this is kind of a situation that some of these larger corporations that you can find yourself in. We had an agency at the time, I think it was Big Red Rooster was somewhere around 60 to 65 people that were directly servicing only Home Depot in-store environment, and we lived in their house. We were on the floor with them. It's weird. It's like you're an in-house agency, but you're not. You're third party, you're contracted, you're the agency of record for this chunk of Home Depot. Well, I was with Big Red Rooster for 2 years. They ended up losing the contract to R. Donnelly. R. Donnelly, I was with them for another 7 years. But this whole span there of almost a decade was basically being in-house, but not being in-house. And it's an interesting situation to be in. I moved up the food chain. There are a few things that we'll talk about here in a little bit too, about like differentiating yourself. That was a really eye-opening thing when I was a junior and mid-level designer, figuring out where I was going. I want to backtrack for a second though, because the way I got into Big Red Rooster was really funny. I was doing this freelance job and I didn't have much of a care in the world. I was doing this. It was comfortable. It was actually overnights too, which was kind of funny. Most of the work I did was from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. in stores. And I, not knowing who I was talking to and being kind of fearless, I walked over to Stephanie Carlamagno's door. I didn't know what a senior director really meant in like the hierarchy of things at the time. Her door was open. She was at her desk. I just knocked on the door and was like, hey, introduced myself and was like, do you have a moment to talk? And she's kind of like, okay, sure. I stepped in there, said who I was, and that I was on this 3-person team doing information design and whatnot and helping them, get some stuff in order for the business. And she just kind of like was smiling and chuckling a little bit. And I told her, I hear that, you're firing the other agencies and bringing in Big Red Rooster. Can you get me an interview? And she was just like, okay, sure. So she got me an interview and I landed the job and went from there. It wasn't until later that I realized that I just like kind of walked right through a bunch of normal protocols and that kind of thing and just went straight to it. And I had an idea that I was doing something like that, but in my head, I was like, you know what? Screw it. I got to try. I got to just do something here. I mean, I can't just tread water. I have places that I want to be in my career, so let's do it. Taking steps like that, it's not always easy to identify those opportunities, but it is important to take them when you see them. So again, it was agency side for a while there for about a decade. And then it was in I guess end of July of 2019 is when I essentially got recruited over to Home Depot. And that's where I've been from that point forward.
You came in with you knew almost everything about the Home Depot by that point, probably having just lived and breathed it. You still had room to learn more. That's
yes.
awesome.
Yes.
So
hey, Doug, we actually have a great question from the chat.
Yeah.
Someone wants to know how do you recommend getting back into visual merchandising after having a break for a few years?
Yeah, that's a good question. And the biggest thing is people. So it's not just like, oh, hey, you have to have already known everybody and know the people and everything. There's a lot of ways you can get to know people. You don't have to work on the same floor with them. You don't have to, only be connected on LinkedIn or something like that. You'd be surprised. There's, a lot of people in the design community in Atlanta joke about how incestuous it is, that everybody has worked for this and worked for that. And we've all crossed paths at some point. You undoubtedly already know someone, or there's probably somebody right now in this chat with you who may be able to like do the, 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon kind of thing. And you could find a way to talk to someone. But the best way to get into it, like now that I have stepped out and then I have been in a different area and I've been in supply chain, I still talk to people that are over there, people that were formerly clients of mine when I was at the agency, and people who were at the agency with me and on my team. And quite frankly, a bunch of those people are my friends at this point. I had probably a dozen of them at my wedding a couple of years ago. So it's really about the people. Your merits are one thing, what you have done with your career, what you have in your portfolio, the skills you have. It is also important, though, to, as a person, connect with another person.
That's really great advice. Thank you.
So yeah, I would love to go back to what you touched on it a little bit in your answer before. So something that you do and you bring to your roles that's really invaluable is focusing on differentiating yourself. So can you elaborate on that and how you've done that yourself?
Yeah. So there are these things that I call aha moments, and it sounds kind of silly. It's just my own little term for it, but it's basically those moments where there's a moment of clarity, or you break through that little barrier, you break the inertia on something, and it can be anything. It can be little things like a technical thing, like you're working in Adobe Illustrator and you realize, oh, that is a really good way to do that. Like Align in Pathfinder. If you don't know Align in Pathfinder, you should go and try messing with that stuff, just FYI. But it can be big things too, like a choice of words. It can be a way that you talk, a way that you present yourself. I even had aha moments about how I dressed, that kind of thing. Well, these aha moments and that whole aspect of differentiating yourself became very clear to me when I was, a decade ago, a mid-level designer at Big Red Rooster, and I was figuring out, like, okay, we have got a team of like 20-something designers. How do I stand out? How do I actually, convince them that I am worth becoming an art director, becoming an associate creative director, whatever it may be, but that next step, I realized I looked around the organization, I looked for a weakness. I basically looked for like something that was not already accounted for. And in my case back then, I looked around and was like, okay, and this was sort of a Big Red Rooster, kind of bled into being at R. Donnelly, was I looked around and I was like, okay, in-store environment, there's the signage, there is the fixture design, the industrial design side of it, the visual merchandising, signage, all that. Those are core aspects of what the agency provides as services to visual merchandising. That makes sense. But there's packaging too. We were getting 1 or 2 packaging projects a month, and it was because there was a national supplier, big and small, who wanted a little help. They wanted us to help them with like figuring something out. Maybe it's like making custom packaging that's made for Home Depot, or maybe it's they never had packaging to begin with. Like there were some small mom and pop suppliers, that kind of thing. So I saw this as an opportunity, and I actually went to leadership at the agency and was like, I want to be the lead over packaging. This is not going to be anything on paper, but I want to be the lead over packaging. Here's why. And I made a case. I came prepared. I came with receipts, and I was like, I can do this. I've done this before. Let me show you. Here's the benefit. Here's why this is good for our client. It doesn't require them paying anything extra on the retainer or anything. It's just us providing an extra service. It's going to look good for all of us. And I did this both as helping the organization and helping the team, but also to help myself. And I differentiated myself in that way. And it did actually get me to the next step. It was eventually a while after that, it was a year plus after that, they actually created an art director role for me because I had used that to move up and I was doing the art director job with a designer title for quite a while there before I actually got it. And I mean, that happens with everyone in almost any industry. But that differentiating yourself is something that you need to try to stay aware of at all times as you are moving up. Don't just look at like what exists already for the vertical aspect of your organization. Like, oh, the next role is this. That's not always the way to look at it. You also got to think of like, what matters to the organization, what matters to the client, what matters to me, and find that point that you can grasp onto that'll help you kind of separate out from the rest of the crowd.
That's such good advice and so true. And like looking and trying to figure out where there's a gap, like where are the opportunities to fill it with like your special superpower, your special interests to really take things further for everyone. Another aha moment, or something that you kind of put a huge focus on, it was in your bio as well, is you differentiate yourself by describing yourself first as a problem solver. Yeah. And I would love to hear more about why you make that distinction.
So all the way back to college and all through your career, you hear these different philosophies as a designer. I mean, one of the age-old ones is design is form and function. Years ago, I used to describe like my elevator pitch to friends and family and people I met of like what I did is I was like, what I do is part art, part communication, all wrapped up in psychology. And eventually I hit a point where really when I want to boil it down and oversimplify what a designer is and really what a creative is, I mean, project managers fall into this too. It's not just like designers by trade and everything, you know, it's the whole kit and caboodle in the creative industry is we are problem solvers. That problem may be more aesthetic or it may be more practical or functional, but we are all problem solvers. And I started realizing this because on paper and self-described, I was a graphic designer. I came out of college focusing on print. You know, people have strong feelings about that, like, you know, web versus print and everything like that. But I came out focused on print, and really in reality, I was focused on branding. Branding was and still is my passion. Uh, that being said, as I got further along with things, especially at the agency, and especially as I moved up the food chain and I was directing teams instead of just being execution and like purely doing, when I started really driving a team of people and multidisciplined people. So you had people with industrial background on the design side. You had people with environment, with various specialties and experiences over their career. I started learning more and doing more. And what we were providing to the client, to Home Depot, was a lot more than just graphic design. I mean, we were doing information design, copywriting, signage, environment, very like broad spectrum user experience. I mean, you were defining like, what is the psychological reaction of the shopper going to be according to the data we have and what we know as designers when they walk into this space and experience this thing that we've just designed that is an entire, say, showroom or experience that's going to have a digital component too, and is going to have a web mirrored component to it also, not just this in-store environment aspect. And when you start thinking like that and you're thinking really broadly about what is a person, a shopper thinking, what is, you know, anyone thinking, and user experience and shopper experience, customer experience, it's all kind of different words for the same thing. You start realizing that what you're doing is you're a problem solver. And that goes all the way down to the little stuff too. Like when you're designing packaging, I think any packaging designer can attest that they are a problem solver. When you're trying to figure out how to put that thing together in the most effective way, it's not just about the way it looks. It is about the way it looks and feels and the experience of, you know, interacting with that packaging at the shopper level. But what about all the way back at like being able to get it through supply chain and onto the shelf without breaking? I mean, there's a lot that goes into it from design and creative, and it's too much to try to wrap your head around in one or two sentences, as my long-winded explanation kind of shows. But I do feel that I am a problem solver.
Yeah, I relate to that deeply. I feel like most of design really, it starts at the problem. Like, what is the thing that you're trying to help unwind or solve for? So that resonates with me. You mentioned you started becoming more of a leader. You have your team, and you have a very specific leadership style. I'd love for you to share with us.
Yeah, of course. This is huge to me. This is kind of, it's not even just professional in nature. Honestly, I'll just kind of spit it out here. I believe in working with people, not working for people. So I work, you know, I don't work for anyone and no one works for me. I work with people. If you're at a higher authority level than me, if you have a higher position than me in the overall, you know, food chain and hierarchy of the organization, then, you know, you earned it, you deserve it, or at least I hope you do. And I give respect. That's the big thing for me, is mutual respect. So anybody who's on my team, it doesn't matter if they're like, you know, straight out of college and they're a production artist and they're working through to be a designer and then an art director and upward from there in the normal, you know, traditional trajectory of things. I don't treat anyone on my team as if they are like, you know, inferior or anything like that. I've never felt that way. It's something I kind of picked up from my dad. It was something that was, he was a bigwig executive at an orthopedic company, the third largest one in the world at the time. And, you know, he was very good at being able to manage people. And one of the things that I saw in, you know, Christmas parties and just different, like I would go with him on some trips here and there and that kind of thing, is that the way that people reacted to him, the way they interacted with him, was that on a human level, there was mutual respect. I could see it from my dad to them, and I could see it from them to him. And that was huge to me because it just intrinsically and just like an internal, indescribable level, that's the way that I operate. I don't believe in authoritarian approach. That hasn't always gone over very well with some of my own leaders because I don't respond well to just, you know, do as I say kind of thing. It's more of an exchange, in my opinion. And I don't do that to the people on my team either. It's not a, do what I said and just do it. It's a, I want you to, this needs to be a back and forth. I want you to tell me what you're thinking. Everybody in any level of their career, any point in their career, you are paid to be the expert at what you do. So, don't just listen and execute. Don't just listen and react. I mean, your whole point of being there is because you're good at what you do. And that's the way I view things, is that it is mutual respect. It is working with people. And I feel that has been tricky at times, being able to balance the human aspect and being like friends with the people that report to me. It is tricky, and it's something that I will always be working on. I'm never going to be done getting better at that. One of the things, for example, that's a very like a granular level, and this is for like the leaders out there and everything. Using this approach, I've had some self-realization, some aha moments over the years where I realized that I have let too much negativity out to people on my team. Like I've been too open with them about frustrations with the client, or I've been too open with them about things that are bothering about our own, senior leadership or executive leadership within the company that we, on paper reported to. And I needed to dial that back and measure what I was doing there a little better, because what I was doing is I was breaking down some degree of trust and confidence that was kind of my fault. They weren't on the same page. They didn't see everything that I did. And me talking about it that manner was not what I should have been doing. So there is a balancing act that you have to do when you take this approach. But I find it very important because it instills trust, a trust on a different level, not just trust that I'm a good leader, but trust that I'm a good person with the people that I work with. And I find that I have gotten so much more out of creative people that I work with when on that human level, they trust me.
Yeah, will you dig into that more about either trust on your team or even trust with other folks in the company?
Yeah. So it sounds simple. It sounds like duh. You need to be able to trust people. But there are different types of trust. There's the type of trust where like you can, somebody's capabilities, their track record, and you trust them to get the job done. That's different, because it's really like when the chips are down in a variety of different ways, like inside and outside of work. And everybody tries to maintain that work-life balance and keep personal stuff out of like the actual workplace. But in reality, we are all human beings. So there is that thing of understanding someone on a level beyond just like the work itself and the projects and the day-to-day and the operational side of it. Trusting someone as a person and emotionally and psychologically trusting them is just as important as trusting their capabilities to be able to get the work done. And I have found that being very transparent and clear with people that I need their help, that I trust them to get the job done, is a really big deal for not just me and getting it done in the best way that it could get done, whether that's like getting it done by the deadline and speed or by the quality level of like thinking way outside of what would be the normal reaction to this project or whatever it may be, whatever the ask is, whatever the problem is. People do a better job when they feel comfortable, but not just comfortable, passionate, when they really care about what they're doing. And trust is a big part of passion. You can't really be easily passionate about your work if you don't trust who you're working with and who's leading you. So as a leader, I found that having my team genuinely trusting me beyond just like the practicality and the operational side of things and getting the job done and all that, them trusting me as a person, that I am going to hear them out, that we are going to get there together, that like it really matters and we are doing this as a group and not just you doing that, that makes people do better work. People think more clearly, more broadly, more differently than they did before. They outdo themselves. And that's a big thing for me, is like, as a designer, I always try to outdo myself. And I tell my team that, like, that's the goal ultimately, is you try to outdo yourself. And trust is kind of the foundational aspect of all of that.
Yeah, I feel like trust kind of puts everyone together in this squad where you're all tackling the same goals and going the same direction all as one, versus feeling like I'm not so sure about so and so over there. They're kind of fading off into the distance, and like I'm not quite sure if they're in it or not. So yeah, trust is key. And
I used to kind of halfway joke about this at the agency side of things, is that we were all bonded over trauma, because the workload is intense over there. I mean, it's the group cranks out amazing stuff, and just the volume is astronomical. You can imagine trying to maintain that level of thing for a Fortune 25 company, I think it is at this point. It's a lot. There's a lot that has to be done. It's in the like, tens of thousands of pieces of design. If you're talking individual components, it's even higher than that are being cranked out every year from that team. So there are certain points, especially seasonality involved. Like spring is a big deal for Home Depot. So all the gearing up for spring is it's a lot from like the in-store environment side of things. I used to joke we bonded over trauma, and a lot of that is, it's a positive thing. Like you go through that kind of thing with people around you that you trust, and you get the job done, and you're proud of the work that you did. It does something different than just have a professional bond. It's more than just, oh, I have cool coworkers. It's like, oh, these are cool people that I spend my days with. And that's really important too, because let's be real about it here. We all are going to spend a lot of time working in our lives, a lot of our days working. So like you need to want to be there and want to be with these people that you're with.
Definitely. I'm going to step back and switch topics a little bit. I'm curious. So some people ask this sometimes. So what's something that you wish you were taught when you were younger?
Oh, I've got a bunch of these. So these are aha moments, and they're things that I truly do wish somebody had told me like way back in the day. The first one though is not. The first one is just kind of, I can't claim this one, but measure twice, cut once. This is like, my wife can attest to this. Sometimes it annoys her because like I'll measure like 12 times and then cut once. But it's a big deal for me because I have found by the hard way from making mistakes that being too reactionary about things, and just to give like an example to it, a really basic one that I think a lot of people can relate to, is I would have clients come to me and be like, hey, here's what we're going to do. Here's what currently exists out there and what we've done in the past. Here's what I'm thinking I want to do. So go. I'm like, okay, cool. And I'd take what they had, and they had a clear picture of what they wanted, and I'd go and I'd do it. And I'd come back to them, and, it go back and forth. You may have ups and downs, whatever it may be. But something that I came to realize is that I was reacting, and I was, doing what I thought was a good idea according to someone else. And really what I should have been doing, and what I started teaching my team to do, is be like, okay, sure. And you do what you're being told to do or being asked to do. You also do what you think is right. And that takes a degree of self-awareness to stop for a second and think and be like, okay, what do I think we should be doing here? What does our team think we should be doing here? It can be hard to do, especially when you're cranking through things and you're getting a clear picture from a client. It's like, oh, thank God we have a clear picture. Like we have direction to go. So let's go. You still do need to measure twice, cut once. Stop for a second and think about it before you react. But some other ones that I can actually kind of claim, things that I learned myself over the years that are, just some words of advice. Ask questions before making statements. This, in my opinion, is huge. I started telling my team this a few years back, and it mainly at the granular level, like when you're doing a presentation to a client, I find this is critical. Ask questions before making statements. You go in there, you present, you start getting feedback from the client. Don't immediately start saying things. Don't start responding with, well, we did it this way because blah. Ask questions. This gives you a couple of different strategic advantages. For one thing, it gives you a second to calm down and think before you start spitting words out in response, trying to defend or convince. It also can kind of paint the other person into a corner. If you ask questions, you ask the right questions, you mitigate some of their ability to dodge and weave when you start making statements. You can mitigate some of the opportunities for the client, for example, to say like, oh, well, I understand what you're saying in response to my feedback, but, and they start doing this. If you ask the right questions, you can kind of paint them into a corner and eliminate some of that and narrow the focus down of what you're actually going to be debating and trying to convince them. So it can give you a second to collect yourself. It can also give you a strategic advantage. So yeah, ask questions before making statements. That's also just a big deal in general. I think you can apply that kind of across anything, professional and otherwise, because it is just, in my opinion, good to take a second before jumping at things. Another one is, this is kind of from a leadership perspective. I try not to say, I need you to do this to someone. I say I need your help with this, and it goes back to the whole working with people instead of for people. I may need them to do something. I may need them to take on a task like, here, Mike, this is your area. I need you to do this. Here's this project. But when things matter, when the chips are down and when things are tough, I try to make a point to say, like, I need your help, because that's the reality of it. Like, I'm not ordering you to do something just to get the work done. It's that I need you to help me out. Like, I'm responsible for getting this done. I'm responsible for you, and I'm responsible for this team. Like, if you fail, it's not you failing, it's me failing. I didn't do a good enough job of, counterbalancing things or giving you what you needed to as far as direction or resources to be able to get the job done. So, that's the way I view things there. And then the couple last ones I'll say here. One is, don't confine yourself to just one specialty, or I guess you could say design vertical forever. And I know I said earlier, differentiate yourself. Find something you can grab and be like, hey, let me take this thing, let me take this weakness within the organization or this opportunity, whatever it may be, and let me run with this so that I can stand out. But what I mean by don't confine yourself to one description, if you will, is for a long time, I called myself a graphic designer. I called myself like a print designer, whatever. I started realizing, and I talked about this a little bit earlier, is that I was doing way more than what my degree said on paper. I had gotten to a point where I was doing environmental, I was doing, information design, copywriting. I was doing all these things that were not summed up by the word graphic designer. When I actually refer to myself now, I call myself a designer, because there's a lot of different things that I'm doing there. It's not within one vertical. So I just encourage people that when you get to a certain point, try not to only describe yourself as like, oh, I'm a UX designer, or, oh, I'm a web designer. That's not where you start and stop. Like, you don't start and stop with your degree on paper. And it's not going to take that long once you're like into your career for that to become a reality. You are going to be multifaceted. You are going to be multidimensional. So embrace it. Maybe don't go full hipster and start being really like, weird about it and like saying like, I'm a, unilateral creative or something like that. Just keep it kind of simple if you want to. But I just try to say this to people because for too long, that perception when someone says those words, like I'm a graphic designer, it's going to trigger something in someone's brain, especially if it's someone who's potentially going to be hiring you, and you don't want to limit yourself to that. That's kind of all I really mean by that. And it was something that it took me a long time to realize. I probably should have picked up on it earlier. And then the last thing I'll say is Jedi mind tricks. This is what it sounds like. So geeky moment here. So Jedi mind tricks, I can't claim that I like came up with this stuff, but I went out to a conference in San Francisco. Actually, during the period with Big Red Rooster of differentiating myself, I convinced them to send me out to a packaging conference. The price point was relatively low at the time, so they're like, yeah, sure, but you're going to have to come back and present to the whole agency. So I was like, okay, cool, deal. So went out there and it was amazing. It was the first ever Die-Line forum, and there's some incredible presenters. I think Stephen Cullen was his name. He was from an agency there in San Francisco, if I'm not mistaken. And he had this whole presentation about Jedi mind tricks, and he made a couple of really good points. So a couple things that are like, I wrote these down. I have them in notes. It was definite aha moments where things like, for example, when I say Jedi mind tricks, I mean like it's a tactical thing. So I've gone to clients and been like, hey, that thing you showed me or that thing you told me about last week made me think to do this. They didn't, and it didn't make me come up with a concept that I had. But what I did there is I automatically, psychologically ingratiated them to liking what I was showing them. So they're automatically going to be like at that little like, oh, hey, cool. This is like my idea. And you have a slightly better chance of getting them to approve it. Another one is what was described as let the baby cry itself to sleep. This sounds a little insulting, but like you're going to present stuff, you're going to get feedback from people who have maybe not really hashed out their thoughts because it's the first time they're seeing it. Especially if it's somebody who's kind of a high level heavy hitter on the client side or something, they're going to want to like work through it. Well, let the baby cry itself to sleep is let people think out loud. Let them give bad feedback. Let them give like, or not bad, but like negative feedback. Let them talk. And a lot of times they will actually kind of come back around to canceling out some of what they started off saying. They will think it through on their own without you defending it. Whereas if you jump in too quickly and start being reactionary, again, ask questions before making statements. If you jump in and you're like too reactionary, you may halt that process that they otherwise would have negated on their own. So these things like that, you will collect them from your colleagues. You will collect them from experience over the years. these Jedi mind tricks are like useful. It can be hard to remember them in the moment when you're like in the middle of a presentation or something, but train yourself because they pay off.
That's awesome. I love that. I want to make sure we have time for questions. So I have just a couple more questions for you. So we've talked a little bit about self-awareness, and I know I'm an in-house designer as well, and we just like go through project after project after project, and they just keep coming. Like, how do you make time during all of that to start developing self-awareness? Because you seem to have a really great handle on it.
I do now.
You do now. Okay.
I can't say that I always did. So especially when I was in the middle of my career, mid-level designer, senior designer, when I was at those stages, I would grind for the sake of grinding because I thought that was going to get me the attention and the credibility with my leadership, and that I would move up that way through my merits, through my skill, and through all the time I was putting into it. That's not how it works. Yes, your skill matters, your capabilities matter. You hitting a home run on a project and like doing something totally awesome that's going to be in your portfolio and everything, that does matter. But self-awareness it's not even just about burnout. It of course is about burnout. You don't want to burn yourself out. You don't want to like look back and be like, what did I do with the past few years? I've been working like 10 hours, 12 hours a day, that kind of thing. And I haven't traveled like I want to. And like, I'm speaking from personal experience here. I did this. I had a number of years where I look back on it and I'm like, oh, that was not the right way to go. And what ended up happening is a little bit of regret, but with regret comes like learning. And this self-awareness thing is something that I try to remind people of on my team, because it's hard to remember it yourself. It's hard when you have that treadmill of the projects every day. So the day to day, the week to week, the month to month, especially if you're in a high volume situation, it's too easy to be like just grinding through the work and doing it. Even if you're working just normal hours, you're going to keep just going and going and going. And you've always got something more on the list. The problem there is if you don't stop for a second to get your bearings and look for like, where is that point on the horizon that I'm ultimately trying to get to in my career? If you don't pause and do that, you may end up kind of wasting your time. You may end up treading water, as I call it, in your career, where you are doing good work and you are getting paid and you are like maybe sort of moving up, like inching up. But it's important to maintain that self-awareness of, where am I and where am I going? You always need to be doing what you're doing for a reason. Never forget the reason. Like, don't grind just because you think you're supposed to be doing it. Don't grind just because you have a lot of work to do. Like, it better be for a reason. You are investing in yourself. And I think it's too easy to forget that. I am guilty of that. I was guilty of that years ago, and it clicked and I got myself out of it. And I focused my efforts in a way that actually matters for me and for my team and for everything. I'm not just being selfish. I'm not just trying to like climb the ladder or something like that. If I did, I'd probably be further up the ladder. What I'm trying to do though, is that I want it to matter to me and to who is around me, that we are all like, not just trying to get the job done. We're trying to get somewhere with our lives.
Mm-hmm. So before I ask a little bit more specifics about like actually developing your self-awareness, I just wanted to point out that the chat is loving everything you're saying. And I'm pretty sure that they've all decided that you need to start a podcast and just do a recurring helping us through our careers. So thank you. I just want to make sure you knew that was happening over there in the chat. So regarding self-awareness, what are some practices that you do or exercises you do with like your team specifically to help them develop their self-awareness?
Yeah,
that perhaps we all could also do as we listen in.
Yeah, so you got the traditional things that are probably already mapped out for you, like, oh, hey, here's your annual review. Also, there's usually mid-year, but going 6 months without thinking about what you're doing is not the way to go about it. I have a thing where like, just because of the sheer nature of the work and the amount of it, I say like, put it on the calendar or it's never going to happen. So one thing I recommend for people, and this doesn't have to even be on a weekday, but you should probably set aside time whenever you are, your brain is starting to like wind up for the day and, you're getting going, or when you're winding down and kind of decompressing at the end of the day, whatever it may be, or maybe your lunch hour, is set some time for yourself once every other week, once a week, once a month, whatever works best for you to reorient you to that point on the horizon. set some time to just stop for a second and think about, like, from the last time I actually sat here and thought about what I'm doing and where I want to go and what job I want to have, what work I want to do, even if it's like what type of work you want to do in a job you already love. Like, what do I want to do next? I want to stay here for years, but what do I want to do next? That kind of thing. Stop and think about like what you want to do. But the problem is, it's easy to say that, but you have to do it in a practical way. I know I've used the word practical a lot in this conversation, but you have to do it in a way that, like, it's not just going to be like, oh, I'll get to that eventually. If you don't put it on the calendar, metaphorically speaking or literally speaking, it won't happen. So I recommend, in my opinion, like, I do every other week where I sit there for a second and I think about it. I got a room in my house that is kind of like our little, like, we call it the library room. It's a tiny room. It's not a giant library or anything, but it's a room where it's kind of like my Zen spot where I can go and sit down and think. And I'll go and I'll sit there and I'll just think about, like, okay, what am I doing? Where am I going? Home Depot, also, lucky for me, does a good job of kind of reminding you on a regular basis. They have a pretty robust, just I guess you could say, architecture behind like the HR side of things, where they're like, hey, don't forget, you need to like be pushing your people further in their career on your team. Also, you need to do this for yourself too. Not everybody has that. Like, when I was at the agency before, that wasn't really in place. It was more manual. We had to do that ourselves. And especially if you're in-house and it's a small group, you may not have that kind of like reminder that's part of, built into the system. You need to do it for yourself. And it's also one of those things where, I'll kind of parlay this into a different part of the conversation here, but in my opinion, and this, people have strong opinions on this, one of the most important things about the work is you need to be proud of what you're doing. So if you reach a point where you're sitting there on a random Wednesday and you're grinding away at a project, or you're like knocking things off and you're doing a great job or whatever it may be, but you have a thought in your head of like, what am I doing here? Like, why am I doing this? Like, this is, if you're bored or you're frustrated or you're just unfulfilled in some way with the work that you're doing, that is a trigger. If you have that moment and you think that, if you're in the middle of a meeting and you think that, make a note to yourself and be like, I need to put something on the calendar. I need to start thinking about this every other week. That is a trigger right there that a lot of people miss. You may just kind of brush that off and be like, oh, whatever, I'm going to go have a drink after work or something like that. But like, you should recognize the fact that there is a meaning behind that in your head. And it's too easy to just be like, you brush it off and you move on. But be proud of what you do. I can't say I've always been proud of everything I did, but I can say that I've been proud of the work that I've done for the majority of my career. And I can also say that, and this is not just because I work for Home Depot now, I'm not only saying this now, I'm not representing Home Depot with this statement, I'm representing me, is that I have not had to feel guilty about the work that I do for 11 years now. I have not had to feel like I'm tricking anyone into thinking something that is like, oh, this is the biggest, this is the nice shiny thing, this is the shiny object you want, that's the best one. It's not actually, it's like, kind of midway down. No, like, I don't have to do that. Like, earlier in my career, when I was doing some marketing stuff, a little bit of advertising, yeah, there's times where you're trying to convince somebody, this is the shiny object that you want, or this is the way you want to go, or this service. But it's a big deal to me that I have not had to feel guilty about what I'm doing for over a decade now. We educate people, we educate shoppers, people who are trying to either do a simple project or they're trying to improve their lives, or even maybe improve the lives of the community around them. People are revamping their homes in 2020. That's the way like Home Depot had such a boom in business, is because all these people are stuck at home and they're like, oh, hey, here's all the stuff that I realized that now that I'm here all the time, I really want to make better. There's a lot of that kind of stuff that goes on in your career where, be proud of what you're doing. Whether that can be any number of things. Pride is not like one defined aspect of things, but be proud of what you're doing.
Yeah, that's great. Great advice. I have, as we switch into Q&A, I have a couple fun questions. You've given us so much like deep things to reflect upon and like move forward with like these new Jedi tricks. So I'm going to take it to completely left field and ask you something fun related to your bio.
Okay.
You said that you are an appreciator or a nerd of many things. So what are you nerding out on right now?
Oh,
anything.
Man.
It could be like technical, or it could be pop culture. It could be like, what's that thing in your life right now?
There's a lot of answers to this. If you're talking about like right now,
the first one that you can think of.
Legos. I've been going
Legos?
nuts on Legos lately. Like, my wife and I both are like still Lego fanatics. It's kind of funny. This past Christmas, my mom actually said to me, she's like, I'm not buying you Legos. Like, you're an adult. I'm not getting you Legos. And I was like, hey, whatever. Made almost a career out of being a nerd. So, but there's this thing called if anybody actually likes Legos and they didn't know this, look up Lego ideas and just go look at their like ongoing blog and stuff. It's people out there who are making things that don't exist. They're like just taking, they're making their own creations out of Legos. Some of that stuff is like unreal. It's impressive and cool, both from like the childhood aspect of things, just being fun about it. But people are also like one of the more recent ones that it got so many upvotes or whatever on Lego's site that they made it a reality is like the apartment for friends. So somebody like built the whole apartment for friends, and so many people loved it that now it's like for a limited time is being sold, that kind of thing. So there's some stuff like that that's pretty neat. And from just a raw creative perspective, it's pretty rad to see what people can do when you give like a blank slate and a bunch of blocks.
Yeah, I feel like, and you just let your curiosity like drag you all over the place as you just dig into it. Okay, Meg, do you want to
yes,
pull out a few of the questions? I know we've got people have questions.
Oh yes, we have tons of great questions. First off, Doug, do you have any advice for getting a job at Home Depot?
Yeah, so for one thing, careers.homedepot.com is a very nice user experience, in my opinion. It's very well bucketed out. It's easy to like get through and everything, and it is updated like multiple times a day. So if you want to have a starting point or kind of a home base for trying to look for like what opportunities are out there, do that. Another thing I recommend is do a deep dive on LinkedIn. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Look at my contacts if you want. I'm not super awesome at responding to messages on LinkedIn. I'll go ahead and say that. Sorry for like long delays and whatnot. But I would say this, like going back to the whole people thing, it's, networking this, networking that. Like I didn't network nearly at all when I was earlier in my career and even midway through my career. Honestly, it was very eye-opening for me when I kind of accidentally networked because I still consider him my mentor, Willie Boozer. He used to be a director in-store environment over at Home Depot. He was one of my clients. He's now over with like Dick's Sporting Goods, but he is an amazing human being for one thing. And he one day years ago was like, I consider you my mentee. And I was like, okay, cool. I have a mentor now that I didn't really intend to have, but I love it. And I owe him for where I am now. Like, I don't think I would have gotten this job. They wouldn't have reached out to me and been like, hey, we have this role. We want you to consider this. Come talk to us. If not for Willie. So, go through LinkedIn, find people, reach out to them, cold call them, just have a conversation, tell them your story, tell them who you are and how you got to where you are, that kind of thing. Be a human being about it too. Because it's not just about like what your work is and what you've done and like where you've come from or where you're at right now. It's like, who are you? So reach out, be a human being with people. But yeah, on like a more tactical side of things, careers.homedepot.com is a great place to start.
Thank you. And here's one last quick question. How do you feel about passion projects in your portfolios? Is it a good way to fill in the blanks or would you avoid it?
So it's a case-by-case kind of thing. For one thing, you need to be transparent that it's a passion project. Don't put it in there as if it's some work and just let it blend in with the rest of them that you did for like legitimate employers or something like that. What I recommend is make a section that is a passion project section. In my portfolio, I inject a little bit of humor here and there where like I have these little subsection pages that say what's coming up. It'll be like a little bit of packaging and that kind of thing. At the end of mine, I have photography in there that I've done. It's all personal stuff. It's nothing like that. I'm not a professional photographer by a long shot. I'm not even good enough in Photoshop to say that I'm like good at post-processing and stuff, but I do love photography and I have some good shots that I put in there and I was very tongue in cheek about it. I don't expect people to be like, oh, you got paid to do photography. No, I did not. So if you have passion projects that you put in there, just be clear with whoever is looking at it that it's a passion project. And another piece of advice there is show it to some of your colleagues who you respect, like whose opinions you respect of all areas. Doesn't even have to be in your industry, but show it to like people and colleagues and friends who you respect. Ask them what they think. Ask them if they think that it's disjointed, that it's like, interrupts the flow of your work, if it interrupts like the idea, because really when you are showing your portfolio and you are pitching yourself to somebody as like a potential employer or something, you are defining your brand. If it is not on brand for you, don't put it in there.
Good advice. So you mentioned this, but I just want to confirm, if anyone wants to connect with you after this call, what is the best way to do that? LinkedIn?
LinkedIn is the best way to do that. Yeah. Again, I'm not going to say I'll be on it like right away. Got a lot of work going on and everything, but yeah, like connect with me. If you got questions, I can do my best to help you get to the next step. I don't exactly have like magical HR contacts where I can just get somebody a job or anything, but I can tell you how you can get there.
Thank you so much, Doug. You may have sparked a podcast today. You've shared a lot of words of wisdom. Everyone was really excited, and we're so grateful that you were our guest this month. So I hope you all have a great rest of your afternoon and month, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.